say whenever it's anything to do with my feelings?
Here's what nobody admits about Meadow Soprano, and why she's way more dangerous than any mobster on screen. Coming up, we rip open every Sopranos myth. Meadow's hidden killer instinct, the crew's shock-fast aging, Paulie's brutal insignificance, Tony's secret power play, Johnny Sack's real breaking point, and the show's biggest lie about manhood and a mob already on life support. Buckle up, because this is the Mafia reveal HBO never aired.
Mr. Soprano, Finn Trolio.
Oh, Finn the dentist, right?
Meadow Soprano might just take the crown for worst girlfriend in TV history. She brings her black boyfriend home to meet her violently racist mob boss father, and then leaves them alone together, and is somehow shocked when it goes south.
So you're just not gonna show up? You love baseball. What is wrong with you?
I don't like the guy.
When Finn, shaken after witnessing one of her dad's friends casually brutalize someone, tries to process his fear.
So it's all about you, right?
Is that all you can say whenever it's anything to do with my feelings?
Meadow doesn't support him. Nope. Instead, she gaslights him, accusing him of being anti-Italian and launching into a ridiculous tangent about the poverty of the Mezzogiorno, as if that somehow excuses mobsters throwing punches in front of her boyfriend. She doesn't stop there.
Vito Spatafori is a married man, Finn. I seriously doubt he wants to kill you.
Finn's very real fear of Vito, who outright threatened him, is waved off like it's nothing.
Finn saw him giving some guy a blowjob.
Then she tells Carmela about the incident without even consulting Finn first, which of course leads to him being grilled by the mafia. And let's not forget poor Jackie. Couldn't even catch a break when he needed it. But hey, at least he got a sandwich and a soda for spilling the beans. And making chili in the middle of a New York heat wave? Sure, there are places where chili is a summer food, chili cook-offs and all that, but come on, Meadow. Worst of all, she twisted Coco's innocent coffee cream comment into an insult that ignited a war and got her own father killed. Real smart.
I used to feel so superior because so many of my friends had these fucked up divorced parents.
In the end, she was always more committed to her family's illusions than to anyone outside of them. Her loyalty is so warped that she'll excuse any brutality if it means preserving the fantasy that all that money and power come from some kind of noble tradition. By the time Finn disappears, probably off to a quiet life in some distant town, Meadow's too deep into the Soprano delusion for anything to change. Here's what nobody tells you about why the Sopranos cast aged faster than anyone expected. You ever notice how much the cast of The Sopranos has aged?
Yeah, I used to go to school with a guy named Artie Bucco.
Every time you look up Artie Bucco, Richie Aprile, Dave Scatino, Chris or Johnny these days, they look like they've aged a century overnight. Sure, it's been over 20 years since the show aired, but the strange part is that the show itself doesn't feel dated at all. Watching it back, it's like time froze forever in New Jersey, so seeing them aged hits that much harder. And it's especially stark when you compare them to other well-known casts. The Friends actors still look remarkably good. The Harry Potter kids grew up and look exactly their age. The Star Wars prequel actors, practically ageless. Meanwhile, the Sopranos crew looks like they've been through the ringer.
Hiya, Chris. Hey, Junior. Yeah, I'm just talking about you.
That's partly because most of the cast was already middle-aged or older when they filmed. Other than Chris, Adriana, and of course Meadow and AJ, there weren't many younger characters. Even James Gandolfini was surprisingly young. Only 35 when they shot the pilot, 37 for most of the first season, and just 45 by the time the show ended, despite looking world-weary even then. And then there's Uncle Jun. The man's like a vampire. 25 years on, and he looks the same. Michael Imperioli has aged well too. Sure, there's grey hair and more wrinkles, but he looks basically the same. Dominic Chianese could pass for his on-screen self all these years later.
You want to try the one? They got lights on the bottom.
I don't wear that shit.
Is it surprising they aged? Absolutely. Disturbing? Not really. especially when you remember most of them weren't exactly kids to begin with. It's a fitting reminder that time catches up with everyone, whether you're in Jersey or not. Never assume Paulie was important outside his crew. The truth is way more brutal than you think. Carmine absolutely knew who Paulie was. Think back to that sit-down about Ralph when Tony brought up the idea of hauling in the guy who was squealing to corroborate the story. Johnny and Carmine exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement that they both knew who they were dealing with. And who was Paulie to Carmine? A low-level soldier who would sell out his own crew for a pat on the back. Useful, sure, but basically disposable.
What's your name again? Paulie Galtieri. Jersey?
Carmine wasn't going to give someone like that any public recognition, especially at a wedding. Acknowledging a rat like him would only drag Carmine's own status down. In that world, nobody respects a traitor. But there's also a strong argument that Carmine truly didn't know Paulie at all, that someone at his level wouldn't bother recognizing a soldier outside his own circle.
Johnny talked to you about me, right? Johnny who? Sack? Talk to me about what?
Paulie might feel important in the DeMeo crew, but beyond that, nobody cares who he is. That's a key theme in their world. They seem powerful and important among their own people. But outside of those boundaries, they're just aging men nobody notices.
I'm a guest. My housekeeper's daughter. Small world. The groom's dad is my third cousin.
That's why Paulie looks into the mirror, shaken. It hits him that outside of his familiar world, he doesn't matter. Even the story about his uncle being run over by a trolley, the one he repeats like it's part of his legend, is meaningless to anyone outside the life.
It's a fundamental lack of respect, and I'm never gonna fucking forget it, neither.
And that's the tragedy. All their money, Cadillacs, and status don't change the fact that the world they once controlled is shrinking. They're left clinging to an existence that, little by little, is slipping away, and they know it. Everyone thinks Tony Soprano was just some mid-level mob guy. But here's the secret nobody talks about.
Junior Soprano, alleged boss of the New Jersey crime family. He's
Talk about fucking time, and he's lucky he's still alive.
Tony Soprano got rich as a capo under DeMeo and Aprile. By the time he was 30, he was already making more than Uncle Junior ever did. Let's not forget the massive house he owned for most of the series. Not exactly a small feat for someone who wasn't even boss yet.
Skim. I'm getting 2 G's a week now.
He inherited his father's crew, Satriales, Barone Sanitation, and other steady income streams. So he was already starting from a strong position. The weekly kick-ups from his guys alone were substantial.
Nordstrom's, they're having a sale.
Plus, with a suspicious mortgage and help from Huey DeAngelis to build the house on the cheap, the property probably doubled in value as soon as it was built.
If I give Tony what he wants, I lose money on the sale.
Tony did well for a capo, much better than most. Even David Chase, putting his official wealth around $5 million, feels low for someone with all those income streams. Tony wasn't boss for long before Jackie died, but by then, he was already one of the most successful earners in the family. Contrast that with Paulie living in a small apartment or Lefty from Donnie Brasco, career gangsters scraping by. And don't forget figures like Benny Fazio, a criminal mastermind, who somehow stayed under the radar. The real money came from construction rackets, loan sharking, Barone Sanitation, the Joint Fitters Union, the Bada Bing, the whole spectrum. The mob controlled construction unions, skimming a percentage of every major project in the tri-state area. That was millions flowing up the chain.
Right? Yeah. Don't buy him anything big. You'll indulge him.
Junior, for all his complaining, had plenty tucked away too. An old-school depression mentality, penny pinching despite sitting on a stash of cash.
Fair.
There's lots of things to take into account. You even know what your EBITDA is?
And historically, guys like Michael Franzese show that a smart earner could rake in more than most bosses.
The Barone routes are now Cinelli routes. That's that.
The key was Tony inherited a thriving operation and then made sure it kept growing. Unlike some of the other captains who just held on, Tony had real hustle, Plus, he and his father mostly stayed clear of serious jail time, so they could put their money to work. Meanwhile, Paulie and others spent years behind bars, which held them back financially. In the end, Tony did well because he played the game smarter than most, and everyone around him paid the price for it. If you thought Johnny Sack only cared about honor, wait till you see what really pushed him over the edge.
Look, last year when Tony and I had our thing, that misunderstanding, you were the voice of reason.
When Johnny Sack finally decided to accept Ralph's apology, it wasn't because of some grand change of heart. The shift happened after Johnny found Ginny sneaking junk food in the basement.
Yeah, Jay Sack told Gabriella she needed a bigger house.
Jenny Sacramone.
That discovery shattered the image he had built up in his head, that Ginny was genuinely trying to lose weight and suffering for it.
She's so fat, her blood type is red goop.
She's so fat she goes camping. The bears have to hide their food.
But Ginny holds ass. She's gotta make 2 trips.
Until then, Johnny thought Ginny was enduring a painful struggle. Ralph's joke hadn't just insulted her appearance, it had mocked her supposed effort and self-control. To Johnny, it felt like a personal attack on his honor as a husband. The insult was amplified because he truly believed Ginny was doing everything she could to change, even if the results weren't visible.
Plus we got Snickers, Kit Kats, and Sprees. Also 5.
But when he found her secret stash of candy, all that sympathy dissolved. It wasn't just one moment of weakness, it was a full-blown habit. In Johnny's eyes, Ginny hadn't been brave or disciplined, she'd been deceiving him. And that realization undercut his sense of outrage at Ralph.
He violated my wife's honor.
Ralph slept with Jenny?
He insulted her. He made a very insensitive joke about her body to some friends of ours.
That's what made him drop the grudge. Why go to war for someone who hadn't been honest? It was easier to conclude that Ginny was at fault too, that she wasn't really trying, and move on. Even though Johnny had every reason to hate Ralph for the insult, it stopped feeling like a matter of honor and started feeling pointless.
The implication was that her ass is so big she could have a mole that size removed from it.
It's an off-colored remark. It was highly inappropriate.
Beneath that decision, there are darker truths. Maybe Ginny wasn't lazy at all, but genuinely battling an eating disorder. Maybe Johnny's own world, with its stress and expectations, played a role in her struggles. But acknowledging that would mean confronting his own life too. Easier to accept the simpler story. Ginny failed him, Ralph was still a jerk, but it wasn't worth losing everything over. The biggest lie The Sopranos tells isn't about crime. It's about what it really means to be a man. What strikes me every time I rewatch The Sopranos is just how scared and small these supposedly tough mobsters really are. Every part of their masculinity is under constant scrutiny.
Junior, take me home. I'm not finished.
Uncle Junior can't enjoy eating out, Tony can't go to therapy, and Christopher can't show a shred of vulnerability in his acting class without feeling threatened. The constant performance of manhood is exhausting and unrewarding. It's bleak.
I thought it would do a lot of it.
You're being frank about the business, kid.
I would never do that. It's only suggested by.
That writer. But the bullfights?
Christopher throwing away his screenplay is especially heartbreaking because creating something is one of the few honest, fulfilling ambitions in a world where most of them only take. Writing is difficult and requires discipline. Acting requires courage and vulnerability. But that's too much to risk, so they'd rather resort to something familiar, like punching someone in the face. That's what makes the show so powerful, this constant sense that they sabotage any meaningful growth.
Where's my arc? Leaves him. See the arc?
Christopher asking, "What's my arc?" is devastating because it underscores his need for purpose, even as fear prevents him from pursuing it. That dynamic resonates because most people recognize that kind of choice. A tension between doing something fulfilling and playing a safe role in a system that rewards toughness and conformity. It's easy to choose the path of least resistance, especially in an environment that equates emotional honesty with weakness. Christopher's decision to quit is especially tragic because it wasn't forced. Unlike Junior feeling pressured into ending his relationship or Tony stepping back from therapy, Christopher walked away solely because he couldn't tolerate being vulnerable. That self-betrayal is what stings most.
My estimation of John Sacramone as a man just fucking plummeted. To cry like a woman, that's a fucking disgrace.
And then there's Johnny Sack, a powerful figure who couldn't wear his glasses in public and lost face simply for crying at his daughter's wedding. Toxic masculinity governs every interaction. Even the most ridiculous rules must be followed. That theme extends to Vito as well.
Ben saw him giving some guy a blowjob.
A top earner and one of the most productive members of the crew, he's still doomed when his sexuality is exposed. Even Tony, who doesn't seem personally outraged, bows to the expectations of the crew and their New York counterparts. What's so compelling is that these men are parasites. They take from other people, they take from each other. And they rarely produce anything of lasting value. They can't grow because they can't acknowledge that they need to.
You've never dealt with your anger. And look at the cost. You are the biggest threat to yourself.
Even Tony is an emotional parasite, draining others of their passions and their sense of self, then discarding them once they no longer serve his needs. That's the brilliance of The Sopranos. It reveals how fragile and ultimately self-destructive these notions of manhood truly are. Forget what you think you know about the mafia. Tony Soprano's crew, too old, too sloppy, and proof the golden age of the mob was already dead.
Nothing. We were just saying, he's young to be made. That kind of shit.
He wanted it.
Tony's crew was a little long in the tooth to still be plain old soldiers, weren't they? Even before Tony took over as boss, guys like Pussy, Silvio, and especially Paulie had too many years under their belts to still just be grunts. Some people are so far behind they actually believe they're winning.
He wanted it, so he stepped up and took it.
And then there's Christopher Moltisanti. Young to be made, they all said, and sure, alongside Eugene Pontecorvo. The whole thing gets romanticized like it's some kind of law firm. Being made is like making partner. A captain, that's a leadership position. Being a soldier is where most of these guys will spend their entire careers. Eugene was pushing 45 when they finally made him. But Chris? Going from associate to soldier to captain at breakneck speed was less likely than Noah giving Tony a knuckle sandwich. Making him captain before Paulie or Patsy was terrible leadership, especially since he couldn't even handle his own collections at the rub and tug without Furio stepping in.
Me, your dad, Bonanimo, Tony, Silvio Dante. We do Mickey Mouse scores.
Of course, nepotism is baked into mob life. Being related or close to someone powerful means you're going to be fast-tracked. That's the way it's always been. They weren't called families for nothing. They were built on blood ties.
Some shot, huh? The way it hooked? You got a fucking horseshoe up your ass.
Meanwhile, most mobsters never make it past soldier. And most soldiers never become captains. A lot of them end up like Lefty Ruggiero, lifers who never rise above the bottom ranks. Sometimes that's by choice. Sometimes it's because only a certain number can ever get made. Either way, earning a place in this world is difficult. Real-life soldiers often wait until they're in their 30s or 40s before they ever see that button. That's why Jackie Jr. thought Chris was unusually young for someone who'd been made. You had to show you were dedicated, a career criminal, not just someone who thought they deserved a promotion.
What caused the decline?
Your sister's ace.
And let's face it, most of the younger guys today don't have what it takes. Italian Americans don't grow up in the streets like they used to. They lack the edge, and that shows. Even the new generation is sloppy. One kid actually threatened a union boss over a text message, leading the FBI right to the top and implicating an 88-year-old capo. Brilliant.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
The bottom line? The good old days are gone. Guys like Pussy and Paulie were already relics before Tony ever became boss. The younger crowd is mostly junkies, rats, or entitled kids who would never survive the life that built this thing in the first place. Appreciate you watching Sopranos Breakdown. If you liked it, help us hit 1,000 likes. Just tap that button, drop a comment, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next time.